For the past 4 years, since 2020, if you were on the market for a legitimate Windows alternative to the MacBook Air product, you couldn't get one. Like, that product didn't even exist, because ever since Apple came out with their M1 chip, no one could match that thing in terms of the overall package. Like, something that was really well built with really good battery life and awesome performance. It didn't exist until today, because we have something pretty special. So this is from Lenovo. It's their Yoga Slim 7X. And inside this thing is the new chip from Qualcomm, the Snapdragon X Elite. And when you take that chip and put it into a 14-inch device like this, you get something pretty special, because you have awesome performance and you get nice design language, really good build quality, and you also get what I think is one of the best keyboards in this laptop space, arguably the best. And you also get a really nice 14.5-inch OLED panel that's very calibrated right out of the box. And because this isn't an Apple product, you dodge all of the Apple traps. So you get upgradable storage, and you have the ports to be able to connect multiple monitors to it on the base models. Let's get into this thing. So the chip is very fast. It's a little faster than the current stuff from Intel and AMD, and it sits between the performance of Apple's M3 and M3 Pro. Now, because it's an ARM chip, apps that run natively on ARM are gonna run the best, but apps that have to go through emulation, so if you take an x86 app, like a pre-existing app that wasn't optimized or tuned specifically for this type of chip, they'll still run on it, except there's a bit of a penalty. Now, the thing is, these new chips and the current emulation tools are so good, you still get solid performance when you're emulating x86. Like, from my testing, we're seeing a 10 to at worst a 15% performance penalty, which is still really good. And I think what that ultimately means is that we don't need to depend on developers to make apps run specifically on ARM. That'd be nice, and when they do it, that's even better, but you can just take pre-existing apps and run it with perfectly good performance. Even apps like Adobe Premiere, which lean on both the CPU and the GPU, in the past, if you tried to emulate Premiere on an older ARM chip, it was a train wreck, but now, very viable. A quick note about gaming. These are not gaming laptops per se, and there's not a lot of native ARM games out there. But despite that, the hardware is strong enough to handle some light titles at playable frame rates. It's not amazing, but casual gaming is very viable on this device. So the chip is great, but I want to go over some hardware features that I think make this particular device interesting. So first is the build quality. I think a lot of the Snapdragon X Elite devices that I've seen have mediocre build quality. And I think it's kind of expected considering that these price points are lower, but this is a $1,200 machine and it is super tanky. This is built really well. The top panel is very, very firm, and then the hinge has no play on it. I think the Yogas are often made well, but this is particularly well done. This device is also very light. It comes in at 1.28 kilos, which is 40 grams heavier than what you see on the MacBook Air. But despite its very similar weight, this has a way bigger battery than what you see in the MacBook Air. This has a 70 watt-hour battery, which is I think 30% bigger than the MacBook Air. And because of the massive battery and the crazy energy efficiency of the Snapdragon X Elite, you get monster battery life. I actually think this is the longest battery life I've seen on a 14-inch laptop, particularly if you're using it for streaming. And it's also very quiet in all of those tasks. But to be able to get a 70 watt-hour battery on a small chassis like this, that's uncommon. That's a battery like that is typically for larger chassis. So it's something pretty special. But then you gotta see the screen. So this device has a 14.5-inch OLED panel that looks awesome. It's X-Rite calibrated, it's fast, it's responsive, it's very bright, it peaks at 1,000 nits, and I think this display is just infinitely better than the stuff that you get on MacBook Airs. It's empirically a better screen across the board. I would argue that this is a better screen than the screens you get on the MacBook Pros, if I'm being honest here. But the other thing that comes with this kick-ass device is, I think, the best keyboard. So it's Lenovo. They own the ThinkPad IPs for the ThinkPad keyboards, and I think these are just the best keyboards. I'm super fast on these things, and I just like the layout, and there's no number pad, which I'm a big fan of. Decent speakers as well. The overall package is just so good. Now, a real quick note on Windows Copilot Plus, because the hardware that's in here, the chip that's in here, has an NPU that gives this laptop access to an extra layer of features in the newest version of Windows. And currently you do need one of these Snapdragon X Elite chips to be able to access these features. So they have a few that are interesting. The first one that caught my eye is the co-creator in Paint. So this allows you to crudely draw something in the Paint program and then it uses text prompts to augment that image. Now, I've only played around it for a little bit, but it is strangely fun and it's easier to use than I thought it would be. And because you can draw that initial sketch, you can kind of give some guidance as to what it is that you're trying to draw or generate. And because it's built right into Windows, it's like very easy to access. The other thing that was interesting was live captions. So you can use it for real-time language translation for videos, like if you're watching a YouTube video or a movie, and you can also use it for calls. Like you could take a call for work and it'll translate that audio in real time, which is pretty cool. The third thing I thought was neat were the studio effects, where you can apply visual effects to your camera feed. And they have your standard stuff like background blurs, but they also have like the eye tracking stuff, so you can kind of look away from the camera lens and it'll kind of reposition your eyeball so it looks like you're looking at the camera. It's a little trippy, but they also have some neat like cartoon effects that I thought looked pretty cool. But all of this stuff is seemingly done with the NPU. It doesn't pull resources from the CPU or GPU, and I think that's the idea here, that you're able to do all of these things without it taxing like the main processing capabilities of your chip. But the most interesting feature of the Copilot Plus stuff was Windows Recall. Now this was something that I wish I could demo here, but they pulled that feature for now while they work on it. But the idea behind Recall is that you'd be able to find anything from your digital life, because Recall would constantly be taking snapshots of your screen, and then it would build this timeline. So if you ever need to find anything or refer to something from the past, it'd be able to go through that timeline and just find it. Now the idea of that is neat, I guess. Like, I mean, it's powerful, right? If you want access to something like that, it's neat. But the security and privacy concerns around that whole mechanic is wild. So that obviously needs to be retooled and rethought. But all the other stuff on Copilot Plus seemed pretty neat, just from the short bit of time that I've had with it. But there you have it. This is the Yoga Slim 7X. There's very few devices on the market that can pull off what this thing does, especially at its price point. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it.